The Senate is now debating Neil Gorsuch's nomination, and Democrats are trying to prevent him from sitting on the Supreme Court. But will political moves like these be damaging to the United States?
It is really all about hating Trump, not partisan politics. There's no doubt that Judge Neil Gorsuch is qualified to sit on the Supreme Court, and he will. Now, political hatred is directly threatening our republic. And we, the people, will pay a huge price if things don't change.
Here now is Kirsten Haglund, conservative political commentator, and Don Calloway, Democratic strategist and former Missouri state representative. Thanks to both of you for joining us. Kirsten, let me start with you. Any truth to what Mr. O'Reilly said?
Well, yes, and I think that most Americans feel it. All you have to do is open up your Twitter account or Facebook profile in order to see that the rancor doesn't just exist in the Senate, but it does among everyday Americans. And so this is something that we all have to take some responsibility for. And this election just really brought out the worst in everyone. Of course, with what's happening on the Hill this week with the nominee, Neil Gorsuch, isn't helping very much. But really, Americans set the tone, right? If we don't like what our senators or congressmen are doing, then we have the ability to rise up to let them know and to vote in a certain way. And it's the apathy, really, that is growing in a very destructive way, because people feel like they don't have any efficacy anymore to affect these people, and so they don't show up and they don't vote. So really, this is about Americans saying, hey, if you guys aren't going to vote this guy in, you know, for Republicans, if you aren't going to show respect to our leaders, then Americans have to step up and they have to vote.
Yeah. Don, what do you think? I mean, it does feel like there's been a real breakdown, and I don't want to cast blame on either side, because I think there's actually just a ton of blame to go around.
Sure.
What do we do from here?
Well, you know, I think that first, it's kind of disingenuous to not have this conversation in the context of what happened to Judge Merrick Garland last year. The reason that we're here now and the reason that Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats...
But that's blame. We're going backwards. What do we do from here?
Absolutely. But so going forward from here, but that is why we're in this position. But going forward from here, it's important, in my view, that the Democrats hold their fire on this and not use the filibuster. I disagree with Mr. O'Reilly that it would be the end of our republic. I think it's important to remember that in times like these, there have always been times like these. So no, it's not the end of our republic. It doesn't threaten our democracy. Every 2 years, the Senate gets another chance to adopt its own rules. So if the nuclear option happens, which by all accounts it probably will, should the Democrats attempt to filibuster, then we'll have another set of Senate rules in January of 2019. So it's not the end of our republic. Yeah. However, it is a substantial incursion upon the Senate traditions, which we hold very dear here in D.C.
Kirsten, I mean, that sounds like that would be a clever move. I mean, if Democrats watching the chess game play out knew, so we filibuster, and then they change the rules and go nuclear, so we end up with this guy anyway. Why don't we lay down our weapons and look like the good guys?
Right.
I mean, well, would that be a clever move? I mean, would they look like the better people, or would they get hammered in their district for rolling over?
That's exactly right. Right here, the Democrats are being driven by the same kind of real animus and enthusiasm among their base that Republicans were faced with in 2010 in the Tea Party, right? And that real drive toward ideological purity. And in some ways, that's a good thing because you get people more engaged. On the other hand, it doesn't really set the stage very well for trying to find common ground or trying to take the moral high ground or the higher road in this case. So they're being pushed. I mean, it's hard to underestimate just how much they're being pushed by very vocal liberal groups, which don't make up the majority of the Democratic base, right, to do this and to not agree with anything or any nominee that Donald Trump puts forward. And the fact is, if Neil Gorsuch, who really is an excellent, I mean, enough cannot be said about this man, and liberal lawmakers as well have applauded him and his record. If he can't get 60 votes in the Senate, there's no nominee who's going to be able to get 60 votes from Democrats.
So, Don, is that one of the challenges of times like right now, is that after you have an election, it's sort of decided for a little while. So the people who are totally engaged right now on both sides are kind of hysterical. You know, like they're the people who are really fired up. And I don't mean to say that in a negative way. I was kidding. Sure. But it's the people who are really committed to what's going on. And people in the middle are tuning out a little bit because they're like, well, you know what, there's not an opportunity to vote for a little while. I can't do anything about it. I'm going to go, not focus on this right now.
Sure, that's definitely an element of this. And Chuck Schumer and the more liberal, safe members of the Democratic Party are right to hold out the red meat to that wing of the progressive wing, the activist wing of the Democratic Party by filibustering. However, that's probably not the best strategy for the long term. There is, however, also a very practical element to laying down the weapons, as we talked about, because for the next 2 years, you want to make sure that you have a filibuster in place that would extend to potentially circuit court judges as well as district court judges and all of those nominations. If the Senate goes nuclear on Friday, which Leader McConnell again suggests that he absolutely will, then that filibuster is gone throughout the remainder of this Congress, and there's no indication that the Democrats will necessarily take back the Senate. They've got a lot of turf to defend in November of 2018.
That was a constructive, thoughtful conversation. You guys are setting a great example. Thank you
so much.
Thank you. All right, we'll do it again. David.
Meanwhile,